Gypsy Rose Blanchard's story is one of complexity and tragedy, a psychological maze of manipulation, control, and a desperate quest for freedom that eventually turned deadly. Her life was shaped not by her choices but by her mother's profound psychological disorder. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, MSBP, where an individual, usually a caregiver, causes illness in another person to garner sympathy, attention, or even a sense of purpose. This disorder would shape Gypsy's life in terrifying and confining ways, turning her into a victim of her own mother, D.D. Blanchard, who systematically controlled and manipulated her into believing she was gravely ill, helpless, and in constant need of care. From a young age, Gypsy was raised under the belief that she was severely ill. D.D. insisted her daughter had leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and a myriad of other chronic conditions that left her wheelchair-bound and dependent on feeding tubes. Medical professionals noted the discrepancies in Gypsy's medical records, but D.D. was adept at navigating the healthcare system, weaving a narrative of health crises that masked her own involvement in creating Gypsy's ailments. D.D.'s need for control was relentless, and she subjected her daughter to repeated surgeries, medical treatments, and medications, many of which were unnecessary and had lasting effects on Gypsy's health. The physical toll was significant, but the emotional and psychological trauma was perhaps even more profound, leaving Gypsy with a fractured sense of self and a deep-seated belief that she was nothing more than a victim of fate. The psychological dynamics between D.D. and Gypsy were incredibly complex. Gypsy's life was orchestrated like a play, each act manipulated by her mother. D.D. isolated her daughter, ensuring she had minimal interaction with anyone outside their home, keeping her social world confined to doctors, charity organizations, and occasionally sympathetic neighbors. This isolation reinforced Gypsy's dependence on her mother, creating an insidious loop of control. D.D. often told Gypsy that no one would love her if they knew the truth about her disabilities. This emotional manipulation anchored Gypsy's sense of worth to her mother's approval, making it almost impossible for her to conceive of a life independent of D.D.'s control. Over the years, D.D.'s deception was rewarded by the sympathy and generosity of those around her. Gypsy became the face of charities and foundations, her image plastered on websites and advertisements appealing for aid. D.D.'s relentless campaign for support even led them to receive free housing, trips to Disney World, and other donations from sympathetic supporters. For many, D.D. was a picture of self-sacrifice, a devoted mother who had given up everything to care for her sick child. This public image only solidified D.D.'s control, making Gypsy's eventual escape nearly unimaginable. Her entire existence had been built upon a web of lies so intricate and pervasive that she could barely separate her own identity from the ailments her mother had fabricated. But as Gypsy grew older, she began to recognize the cracks in her mother's story. Her physical abilities, despite D.D.'s insistence on her limitations, gradually became evident to her, and she began to question the truth of her condition. At around the age of 19 or 20, Gypsy secretly accessed the internet for the first time. It was through social media that she found the means to escape, reaching out to the outside world, including Nicholas Godejohn, a young man she met on a Christian dating website. The relationship between Gypsy and Godejohn developed quickly, fueled by her need for love, independence, and an ally against her mother. Godejohn, himself a troubled individual with a history of mental health issues, became a focal point of Gypsy's plans for escape. Their online romance was intense and unconventional, marked by role-playing fantasies that revealed both Gypsy's desperation and her limited grasp on what healthy relationships entailed. They spoke of love, of marriage, and eventually of a plan that would end D.D.'s hold on Gypsy's life permanently. The plan they concocted was both tragic and terrifying, born from a place of hopelessness and desperation rather than genuine malice. In June 2015, with the help of Godejohn, Gypsy orchestrated her mother's murder, believing it was the only way to free herself from the prison D.D. had created. The act was brutal, a reflection of the years of pain and control that had defined her life. D.D.'s death shocked those who knew her. Many had seen her as a devoted mother, while others had suspicions about her methods but never imagined the extent of the abuse. For Gypsy, the moment was one of liberation, albeit a short-lived one. The murder, however, drew public attention quickly, and within days, Gypsy and John were arrested. As the case unfolded, the media and public began to understand the depth of Gypsy's suffering. The court proceedings revealed the layers of psychological abuse she had endured, turning public sympathy in her favor. Gypsy's lawyer presented her as a victim, a young woman who had been denied her autonomy, forced into a life of pain and isolation. In court, Gypsy appeared fragile, speaking about her mother with a mixture of love, fear, and residual loyalty, highlighting the deeply complex and often contradictory feelings she had toward DD. Her internal conflict was evident, while she felt a sense of freedom in her mother's absence. The guilt and trauma of their relationship continued to weigh heavily on her. Her testimony shed light on the horrors of Munchausen by proxy, a rarely discussed disorder that was now at the center of a national conversation. During her trial, Gypsy's appearance and demeanor were carefully scrutinized. The frail young woman in the wheelchair, once celebrated for her bravery in the face of illness, was now at the mercy of a legal system struggling to understand her unique situation. Gypsy's defense team argued that her actions were a direct consequence of years of abuse, citing her psychological state and lack of normal cognitive development as mitigating factors. She was a young woman who had been denied the chance to grow, learn, and develop a sense of self outside of her mother's control. The prosecution, however, argued that while DD's treatment of Gypsy was unquestionably abusive, it did not justify murder. They contended that Gypsy had options, avenues for escape that did not involve violence. But to Gypsy, these options seemed like impossible fantasies, remnants of a world she had been forbidden to understand or participate in. The sentencing was a pivotal moment. The court acknowledged the profound psychological trauma Gypsy had suffered, choosing leniency over the harsh punishments typically associated with such crimes. Gypsy received a sentence of 10 years, with the possibility of parole, a decision that reflected the court's understanding of her complex situation. The verdict sparked debates about the ethics of justice, mercy, and accountability, forcing society to confront the ways in which abuse victims often become entangled in criminal acts as a consequence of their suffering. Gypsy's story remains both heartbreaking and thought-provoking, a cautionary tale about the devastating effects of psychological abuse and the blurred lines between victim and perpetrator. Today, Gypsy is in prison, but many see her confinement as an ironic twist, a second prison replacing the first. Nonetheless, her time behind bars has offered her the chance to explore the freedom and autonomy that were stolen from her for so long. She has spoken about her aspirations, her desire to lead a normal life, and her hope for a future that is finally hers to shape. This case sheds light on the darker aspects of caregiving and the complex ways in which love, control, and dependency can intersect to create an abusive relationship. The trial, and the media frenzy that surrounded it, brought attention to the phenomenon of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, exposing a psychological disorder that too often goes undiagnosed and misunderstood. For Gypsy, the road to healing is long and challenging, but her story serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the complexities of justice in cases of abuse. As she works to rebuild her life, Gypsy stands as both a tragic figure and a symbol of survival, embodying the painful but profound journey of breaking free from an abusive past to embrace the uncertain future ahead.